Good morning, my friends. How are you? I'm so happy again to be here with you. Actually, I'm traveling today, so I'm going to Amelia Island in Florida to conduct a week-long retreat called Seduction of Spirit. And so I'll be in Florida for this whole week, but I shall stay in touch. So today I thought we should explore the notion of self. That's all we do anyway. And I thank you for your indulgence, and thank you for your participation, and thank you for your feedback, and thank you for any criticisms, and also thank you for just hanging out here together so we can explore what we call reality and move from human to meta-human. So we're up to 800 people. I'm just waiting for the number to go up to 1,000, and then we can start this conversation. Hello, Patricia, and hello, Rubina, and hello, Tina, and hello, Leslie Grace, and hello, Marie. Where are the guys? All women. Okay, so let's talk about this exploration of the self, since we are up to 1,000 now. And I have to tell you that today's discussion was prompted by a article in the New Scientist. And the article in the New Scientist is how to think about various matters, but also how to think about the self. And of course, I'm going to share with you how to not think about the self. But let me just say, quote from this article a little bit. So it starts by saying, most of us are convinced that we are coherent individuals who are continuous in time. But this sense of self is a slippery customer and has an intriguing origin. It goes on, let's be honest, it is what we think about the most, ourselves. What we want to eat or do, how we feel, whom we love. It is the essence of being. This selfhood generally feels like a continuous me sitting somewhere in our heads, a me that is the same today as yesterday. Most people feel that they are a coherent, integrated individual. They have free will, they are making their choices, and they're looking out through their eyes at the world around them, says Bruce Hood at the University of Bristol, UK, author of The Self-Illusion. Okay, so there we are, The Self-Illusion by our friend Bruce Hood, talking about selfhood. So here we are talking about selfhood. To go on, this article says, and that is just what selfhood seems to be, an illusion. You're actually a collection of conflicting messages and signals and thought processes, and these are somehow brought together to experience a unified self. Fine, so yourself is just the you experiencing that, right? That becomes a Russian doll problem, says Hood. There's someone inside the head who's having these experiences taking place inside their head, and so on. Then he goes on to talk about the neuroscience. He says neuroscience tells us that our subjective sense of self must be a distributed experience involving various bits of the brain. Although experiments have taught us much about the brain areas involved in creating it, how exactly is it conjured up still eludes us. And I will say it will continue to elude us. We do know that a sophisticated sense of self and others comes only on us gradually. Understanding that your thoughts are different from someone else's and being able to reflect on your own thinking, that's a higher order skill and doesn't emerge until you are 3 or 4, says Megan McClelland at Oregon State University. Even then, brain areas involved in our experience of the self don't fully mature until we become adults. Okay, so, the article goes on, but it says, ultimately, our sense of self allows us to form our complex human societies, making the self, if it is an illusion, an extremely useful one indeed. Okay, so much for the scientific model of the self. And, if you stick to neuroscience, that's a pretty good article in the New Scientist, and I do recommend that you might want to read it. But there's a problem. So who or what is it that comes up with these ideas of the self? What is it that knows or does not know that the self is an illusion? What is it that knows the brain as an experience? What is it that knows or understands neuroscience? Is the brain trying to understand the brain? This is the problem when we objectify and reify all experience. As I've said many times before, the brain itself is a reified experience of the mind, and that the mind is conditioned by stories. And human beings like to tell stories. We have told stories about existence ever since we in fact became self-aware. So becoming self-aware was the beginning of stories about the self. Mythological stories, religious stories, theological stories, philosophical stories, and now scientific stories. But of course, what this article is talking about is not really the self, but the ego identity, which is of course provisional and constructed. The ego identity is provisional and constructed. And these days, actually, we are told that there is something called the default mode network in the brain, which houses, in a sense, the physical, biological, neural correlates of the ego identity, which I said already is provisional. As soon as you're born, that identity starts to get constructed, and the reason I would agree that that is an illusion is that it's a construction by the self as a model of the self. So scientists reify experience into the notion of an objective world, which includes the idea of a brain. Okay. How do we know there is such a thing as a brain? Well, because it's an experience in human consciousness as an object. But before it is an object, it is a perception. And before it is a perception, it is a modified form of the self. So the real self, the true self, is obviously not the evolving ego identity, which actually begins at birth, but even at birth there is the residue and the recycling of past memories and experiences that create the imprint or the basis or the architecture of the evolving personality. And if you understand Eastern spiritual traditions, which are not based on the common method of scientific investigation, which is based on dualism, the self and the other, but on actually going beyond thought and transcending thought, and also becoming an observer of the thought process, higher order thinking or higher order experience, you actually can construct your sense of self. And this is what happens over an entire lifetime, till death. And upon death, then that residue of experiences, memories, desires, imagination, thoughts, meanings, context, relationships, stories, the residue of that still exists in non-local awareness. And that is what recycles as the personal self, the constructed self, which is constantly evolving in space and time as the mind, body, world experience. And all of that, the mind, body, world experience, is in a sense illusory because it is constructed and temporal and time-bound and continuously recycling and evolving as what we call a person. But the person itself is not an entity, but a process in non-local awareness. So it is true, there is no little me sitting inside this head looking out at the world through these eyes. That is true from a scientific perspective. That is true from a scientific perspective. There's no little me inside this head looking out at the world. When I use the word I, then I'm not implying a body-mind. I'm implying the non-local awareness in which thoughts arise and subside, in which images arise and subside, in which feelings arise and subside, in which desires arise and subside. And this I has no location in space-time. We've said this many times, that Atman is Brahman, the self of the individual is the self of the universe, and in fact there is only one self, there is only one awareness. That awareness is the common ground of all experience. It's the common ground in which all minds, all bodies, all experiences of the world are conceived, constructed, governed, and come into existence. That I, being non-local, is not subject to birth and death, although it modifies itself into the experiences of birth, death, and everything in between. So, Aurora actually asked, why is this all happening? I don't know. No one knows the answer to why. We can speculate through human understanding. And the great Vedantists and Kashmir Shaivists and other non-dual thinkers say that since the self is infinite, it experiences itself in infinite modes. And these infinite modes literally are infinite modes of knowing and experiences that modify themselves as infinite experiences. And this is usually referred to as Leela. Leela is the play of the universe, and also as Maya. Maya, as I've mentioned, it is frequently translated as illusion, but it is also a word that represents measurement, time, meter, matter, music, myth, and story. So this is a deeper understanding that in the words of Adi Shankara were embodied in his famous hymn, neti neti. I'm not the mind, I'm not the body, I'm not the ego, I'm not the intellect, I'm not the five perceptual activities, I'm not the experience of the world, I'm not the three gunas, I'm not the forces of nature, I'm not energy, I'm not information, I'm not matter. I am the awareness in which all this is constructed. And that awareness is the common ground of every experience in every living species, a plant. By the way, I was looking at this New Scientist issue, and it also has an article on how plants, when they are injured, how they squeal. Stressed plants let out ultrasonic squeals. And this only reinforces the notion that all there exists is awareness. All there exists is awareness. You and the universe are awareness. Going back to our favorite shloka from the Shiva Sutras, meditate on your body as the universe and having the nature of awareness. Then everything is a modified form of awareness. You and the universe are awareness. This allows us, this notion allows us to explore reality way beyond any scientific model of reality, way beyond any reified models of brain and neuroscience. Just ask yourself, what is it that knows the brain? What is it that knows neural correlates? What is it that knows that it knows? Or what is it that also knows that it doesn't know? What is it? And that is the most fundamental level of being that we call I. I is the non-changing factor in every changing experience, including the changing experience of mind, body, and universe. This is ultimate liberation into the self, or what is called self-realization. Kelly says, I'm going to be more careful when I'm watering my plants. Yes, regard every experience, divine and diabolical, as sacred. And when you do that, you will also experience that which is sacred in you at all times, eternally and now. Somebody just asked, is our perception our reality? It's yes, it's your experience of everyday reality, but it's not reality. The real reality is that which perceives and that which interprets the perception as well. Every object is an experience. Every experience is a perceptual activity. Every thought is an interpretation of perceptual activity. And every thought is the arising and subsiding of modified expressions of yourself. Take care. I'll next connect from the retreat, Seduction of Spirit in Florida.